Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
The details from yesterday in the Middle East are still changing by the hour.
Israel has begun its ground offensive into the south. A short while ago, Israeli forces fired flares into the night sky amid heavy shelling.
We are coming on the air because ABC News has now confirmed Iran has just launched a retaliatory missile attack targeting Israel.
Whatever those details are, the big picture is now clear. The larger, regional war that most of the world has been trying to avoid for a year may have just begun. Iran has fired missiles directly at Israel. Israel has put troops on the ground in Lebanon. Retaliation for both of those things is likely. And then what happens? How did the past month bring the region to the brink? Is it too late for anyone to back down? What do you need to understand to make sense of whatever comes next? I'm Jordan Heath Rawlings. This is The Big Story. Dr. Randa is the director of the Conflict Resolution and Track 2 Dialogues program at the Middle East Institute. She is in the U.S. right now. She is based mostly there and occasionally in Beirut. Hey, Randa.
Hi, Jordan. How are you?
I'm adapting to a rather fluid situation this afternoon, as I imagine you are as well.
Of course, aren't we all?
Yes. Well, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. As I'm speaking to you, Iran has launched a missile attack at Israel at the same time. Israel's ground forces are moving into Lebanon. I guess I'll start by asking you, is there any way back from this now, or is this the larger regional conflict people have been warning about for a year?
I mean, we definitely are in a regional conflict. How large it's going to get, we'll see. We will see when will the Iranian strike end, because it seems to be coming in waves as we speak. What will be its consequences on the ground in Israel? And then will Israel decide to retaliate? Because when the Iranian Revolutionary Guards issued a statement prior to the start of the attack, saying this attack is in retaliation for Israel's assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, for the assassination of their deputy IRGC commander in charge of Syria and Lebanon, who was in the meeting with Sayyid Nasrallah, and also in retaliation to the assassination of another, I think, commander the Israelis killed. And then they said they won't, if Israel were to retaliate to this attack, we will also retaliate with a bigger, much larger attack. So we're going to see if now Israel will just absorb this hit, depending on, again, what kind of damage this hit results in. Mm-hmm. And if it decides not to absorb the hit and to retaliate, then we definitely are on a regional escalatory spiral.
For those of us who don't understand the politics of the region or follow it so closely, can you explain why Iran would go after Israel in retaliation for Israel taking out Hezbollah leadership?
Hezbollah was formed in 1982 in the aftermath of Israel's invasion of Lebanon. And at the time, the purpose of that invasion was to remove the Palestinian fighters who were using southern Lebanon as a territory to launch strikes against Israel from. So that objective was achieved by Israel at a tremendous human cost. There was a major massacre, that resulted there, the Sabra Shatila massacres, where, hundreds and hundreds of civilians were massacred. But as a result of that, you had, the Palestinian fighters were kicked out of southern Lebanon. And then what did Israel get in return? It got the Lebanese resistance fighters, meaning Hezbollah. And the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, were basically the godfathers, the trainers. They are still the trainers, the funders, the party that gives weapons to Hezbollah. And part of the reasons driving the Iranian Revolutionary Guards for supporting Hezbollah in this way, there is a declared reason. These are people who would like to resist against Israeli occupation of their lands. At the time, Israel was occupying southern Lebanon, part of southern Lebanon. They stayed, in fact, in southern Lebanon till 2000, when then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak decided on a unilateral withdrawal of Israeli forces from most of the occupied area of southern Lebanon. But still, Hezbollah said, we still have a small area of southern Lebanon occupied. We're going to continue with our resistance mission. And that was the reason for keeping their humongous military arsenal. But the main reason for Hezbollah's founding by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is to help Iran protect itself from Israeli attacks against its territory, against its nuclear facilities, to help Iran protect itself from U.S. attacks, against its territory, because, Hezbollah and Lebanon is very close to Israel. So missiles, which they have now in the hundreds of thousands, once directed en masse toward Israel, they can, make more of a damage than what Iran can direct when it is, it's thousands of miles away from Israel. And so the mission of Hezbollah, stated mission to defend Lebanon, to liberate territory in South Lebanon, defend Lebanon from Israeli attacks, deter Israeli aggression, but the driving objective of the Iranian regime to support, fund, and they have been funding Hezbollah for years now, since 1982, is to have Hezbollah's weapons be used to protect against potential Israeli attacks on Iranian territories and military facilities.
And what was Hezbollah doing before Israel decapitated it, for lack of a better term, last week and eliminated almost all of its leadership? Was there attacks coming from Hezbollah that led to that retaliation, or was that a new front in the war itself?
No, October 7, you had Hamas, do its terrorist attack on Israel. And then on October 8, the Secretary General, now deceased, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah, now deceased Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, said we have to come in and support Hamas in its war against Israel, and started launching rockets. And since then, Hezbollah has been launching rockets into Israeli territory, and Israel retaliating, to every salvo of rockets from Hezbollah.
I guess I was just asking to get the timeline straight, if there was anything that had precipitated, because I want to walk you through sort of the escalation over the past couple of weeks that had precipitated Israel's action, or was it just the steady stream of Hezbollah support for Hamas and launching rockets over the past year?
I think it was definite. Look, the Israelis have said, and they have been saying now since October 8, because they had about 60,000 of their citizens who lived in the northern communities evacuated, left. And the Israeli Prime Minister has been promising for some time that once they, finish the fight in Gaza, and the Israeli military is saying we are pretty done there, that once they finish the fight in Gaza, they're going to turn their attention to, regaining control of northern Israel, in order to enable those 60,000 plus Israeli citizens to return to their homes. And I think at some point, there was a diplomatic process being launched, being engaged by the United States for some time, trying to, convince Hezbollah to stop its attacks. The problem is that when they launched their attack on October 8 against Israel, Hezbollah Secretary General at the time linked the two wars and basically said, we will be stopping our attacks when there is a ceasefire in Gaza. And if you remember, last November, there was a brief ceasefire in Gaza negotiated by the Americans, the Qataris, and the Egyptians. And during that time, Hezbollah totally stopped their attacks, basically, giving credence to their argument that their war or their attacks against Israel are very much linked and in support of what's going on in Gaza. And so there have been attempts, again, to have Hezbollah de-link those two fronts and to say, okay, Gaza ceasefire is not achievable now. Let's work on a Lebanon-Israel ceasefire and on a process, to bring stability to that border area which then would enable Israeli citizens to go back to their community. But also, we have to remember, there are 100,000 Lebanese citizens who lived in those border communities, in those border villages, who are farmers, who lived from the land, who basically this is agricultural area of Lebanon, also who were, who were forced to leave their homes and their land.
So that takes us up to the attacks that decimated Hezbollah leadership. After that, if Iran hadn't launched these missiles today, the breaking news would be Israel sending ground troops into Lebanon. What is their stated reason for doing that, and why would they need to after already decimating Hezbollah?
That's a very good question. First, we have to also know that the decapitating of Hezbollah's basically leadership and the decimation of Hezbollah leadership has been going on for some time, prior to this last Friday, when this major strike on a Hezbollah stronghold in southern suburbs of Beirut killed Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah. All along, Israel has been using vast amounts of intelligence it collected over the years against Hezbollah to target commanders. So you had direct hits by Israeli drones on cars, on killing a specific commander here, a specific commander there. Basically, over this last 10 months, pretty much all of the military command structure of Hezbollah, has been decimated. And then you got the coup de grace, if we can put it this way, the last thing, which killed the Secretary General on Friday, who is the chief, who is the head of that military command council. Now, Israel, what's happening is that Israel found, Hezbollah now is at a weak point, at its weakest, in fact. These were severe blows to Hezbollah leadership structure and to Hezbollah's communication, to Hezbollah's capacities internally to coordinate, to plan attacks, severe blows. And so Israel understands that despite all of this, despite what they have done in terms of eliminating these commanders, Hezbollah was still launching rockets against northern Israel as late as yesterday. And so their argument is that they have to come in and clear this, the distance varies, or the range of the stretch of land. They said we have to clear anywhere, 10 to 18 kilometers from the blue line, which is the unofficial border between Lebanon and Israel. So we have to clear 10 to 8 kilometers of that area inside Lebanon, all the way up to the Litani River, right? And by clearing that of the Hezbollah attack infrastructure and of any presence for Hezbollah fighters, then we can prevent Hezbollah, or we can basically decapitate Hezbollah's abilities to launch these rockets against northern Israel, okay? So they launched this ground invasion. They say it's limited. Well, in 1982, they said it was going to be limited. They ended up staying 3-4 months, and they reached the outskirts of Beirut. And then eventually they had an occupation of a stretch of southern Lebanon that lasted until 2000. So it's going to be almost, if not impossible, for Israel, despite the ground invasion, unless it stays and holds territory. So it's clearing territory right now, right?
Right.
Well, it has to hold it. By holding it, it's going to open itself to the kind of insurgency attacks that we Americans had suffered from in Iraq, that Israel's had encountered during its occupation of southern Lebanon between 1985 to 2000. This was a bloody insurgency led by Hezbollah. They are now trying to occupy and clear a land that is basically Hezbollah territory. Their fighters are villagers from these places. They know this terrain extremely well. The geography of the terrain itself is very much in the defender's favor and not in the attacker's favor. And unless they are willing to fight an underground warfare, which is extremely difficult to do and extremely bloody to do, because most of these missiles are stored, as well as the fighters, they will be operating from long stretches of underground tunnels that Hezbollah has been now putting in place for decades, like is the case with Hamas in Gaza. And so they are, at a time when their military is already stretched thin, is already, tired, here they are now entering another, starting another war, and in this case, invasion of a sovereign territory that is going to bog them in a bloody, sustained campaign for some time.
I should let you know, now that we're speaking of what happens next here, that the attack on Israel from Iran has now reportedly ended. According to the New York Times, more than 200 missiles, no casualties reported yet. But where does this go from here, I guess? You mentioned that what Israel does will kind of determine it. How do you de-escalate something like this that has moved so rapidly over the last couple of weeks?
So the first thing is, the Americans, I'm sure the president is talking with the Israeli prime minister. And as in April, when Iran attacked, Israel, again, without leading into casualties, targeting mostly military assets, Israeli military bases. At the time, the advice of the American president, Mr. Biden, to the prime minister, Netanyahu, just absorb it and let it go. And then a few days later, Israel attacked, without publicly stating it, attacked military assets inside Iran. And the message was sent to Iran by that attack, which was not publicized, by the way. Like, you attacked us, we're going to attack. So now we're going to see if Israel what's going to be its response, and what will the United States do in terms of its advice to the Israelis. My hunch is that, the problem is that right now, the Israeli leadership, especially Mr. Netanyahu, are are feeling themselves victorious. There is this hubris, in a way, that is underpinning their decision-making. They have decapitated Nasrallah, which is, they have decapitated the command structure. They are attacking Houthi targets in Yemen. They are attacking targets in Syria. They are now inside Lebanon. And at the same time, the US is supporting them unconditionally. So there is this hubris motivating their decision-making calculus. And I don't know if they will decide to retaliate, no matter what the US tells them. So we'll have to wait for the next day or two to see what's going to be the reaction, because that will determine whether this will escalate further or we are going to stop at here. Now, with Iran having launched these missiles, then I think it is in a position to say to its people, but also to the supporters of Hezbollah, who until today were very angry at Iran. You should listen to what's being discussed inside Lebanon on TikTok, on some WhatsApp groups, on chat groups by supporters of Hezbollah saying, where is Iran? Here we are dying for Iran. They gave us weapons to, supposedly, and they promised to, protect us and whatever. What are they doing? They killed our Secretary General, our leader, and they have not done anything. So there was a lot of pressure on the Iranian supreme leader to respond. And the question was, in my circles of experts, okay, how will this response be? Is it going to be a direct Iranian attack, or it's going to be an attack by its proxies, other proxies, not only Hezbollah, but Iraqi militias that are pro-Iran, militias in Syria, Houthis? Well, we have the answer today. The supreme leader decided it's going to be a direct Iranian attack. And so we're going to see how Israel will retaliate, will react, if any, will retaliate, if any. And then after that, I think Iran is still interested in not getting bogged into a regional war. I think Israel is also not interested, although I'm not as sure as I was like a week ago. I think there's part of the political class in Israel, including Netanyahu, the prime minister, basically who believes maybe it's time to go after Iran. We have weakened its most important partner in the region, meaning Hezbollah. And while Hezbollah is so weak and so decapitated, let's go at the head. Let's go against the head of that network in the region, that includes Houthis, Iraqi militias, Syria. the Assad regime. And let's go and target them. Let's attack their nuclear installations. I don't know if they have made that decision yet, but I think there will be people around the Israeli prime minister, who will argue this is a unique opportunity to rechange the political map and security map of the region by not eliminating, but by weakening Iranian footprints in Israel's neighborhood to the point that it no longer represents a threat to Israeli security, right? So I think that's where we are. We are at a very dangerous point, at an inflection point, where Israel has to decide if it wants to go into a regional escalation. And then if so, Iran will then retaliate, of course, to Israel retaliation. And then we are locked into an escalatory spiral that is very, very, very dangerous, and that will pull in, American forces, that will pull in, that will affect the global economy. This is a region where you have a lot of the oil assets, for the world. And so we are at a very, very major inflection point right now, and very dangerous point.
We're less than a week away now from the 1-year mark of the October 7th attacks. Does that have any significance in the region? Will people be watching on that day to see what could happen? And I guess just what will you look for?
I mean, a lot is already happening.
Fair enough.
And so I don't know if, again, I think the next 2 days are going to be critical. So October 2 and 3 are going to be super important to watch. And again, watch what Israel decides to do. And beyond that, we have to watch what Israel is doing in southern Lebanon and what are its plans. If it's truly, is it truly a limited invasion of the country and clearing, as the American Secretary of Defense, the attack infrastructure of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and getting out? Or is just the prelude, what we are seeing right now is a prelude to a long occupation of a major stretch of southern Lebanon, leading to a sustained Hezbollah insurgency, which, by the way, will be supported by the majority, by all of the Lebanese. There is this feeling of triumphalism right now in DC about what Israel has done vis-a-vis Hezbollah, argument that some of the Lebanese are cheering them on. Well, once Israel goes into Lebanon, and it has already, and once it's clear to all the Lebanese, all of them, that this is a long-term occupation, you are going to see the wind shifting in terms of public opinion inside Lebanon and inside the region against Israel. So it's going to be another occupation by Israel. So there is the occupation of Palestinian territories, and now it's an occupation of Lebanese territory. And we are expecting, the expectation is that there will be a very high number of casualties in Lebanon as this progresses. So again, I don't know how much the international public opinion can take, how more can take of lives being lost. So far, they have shown more readiness to accept higher number of human lives lost, Arabs and Muslims. I don't know if they keep accepting that, or we have become desensitized. I don't know. I'm shocked by the fact.
Well, that was going to be my last question for you, which is that it occurs to me that we've gone through this entire conversation without discussing what is still going on in Gaza.
Yes.
And that's how far we've evolved.
Yes, I agree with you. And, killing is still going in Gaza. Every day, people, children, women are dying. And yet, the objective, Mr. Netanyahu's objective of decimating Hamas, of catching the leader of Hamas, Sinwar now, who is still of denying Hamas the ability to launch rockets, which they are doing in a much more limited fashion against, Israeli territory, has not been achieved, despite what the military has said. Hamas is still there. It will reconstitute itself. Think of all these kids who have lost their parents, who have seen their mothers and fathers killed by Israel, and they are orphaned. Where do you think they are going to go next? They're going to join the ranks of Hamas and maybe of a more radical organization than Hamas. The same thing in Lebanon. Think of all these people, who have lost and will be losing parents in Lebanon. Who do you think they will go to? which party they will join. Hezbollah, 1982 invasion of Lebanon by Israel was the founding moment of Hezbollah. The 2024 invasion of Lebanon is now going to resuscitate Hezbollah from its weakest point because it will rally people around Hezbollah as the only party that can liberate Lebanese lands.
Randa, thank you, as always, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Dr. Randa Saleem, Director of the Conflict Resolution and Track 2 Dialogues Program at the Middle East Institute. That was The Big Story. For more, you can head to thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other by emailing hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or by calling us up and leaving a voicemail at 416-935-5935. The Big Story is in your favorite podcast player, and it's on your smart speaker if you ask it to play The Big Story podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Jordan Heath Rawlings. We'll talk tomorrow.